Well, good morning. Good morning. And thank you for being here. And if anybody's online, welcome. And we're kind of exciting times because Rob comes back next week. And and that is worth being excited about. And before he left, he asked me if I'd do one of the Sundays. And I think he picked this one, the one before he comes back, because he will shine even brighter next week after you put up with me today. Okay. My name is Jim Fisher. They asked me to kind of do a testimony thing, but I'm not worth talking about very much. There's not a lot there really, and so I kind of have a two-part thing going on today. One is a little bit about me because I want to honor that, but I want to talk about something that's kind of been on my mind since, for the longest time, and especially since spring here and having to do with us here at the Gathering House. And so I'm going to kind of blend that together because it does kind of fit. And so that's what we're going to kind of do today. Okay? I grew up in Cheney, not far from here, raised by my mom and a couple uncles. My father passed away in a fire truck accident when I was very young. I was 5. And so that's what I grew up doing. Grew up like many, Catholic. I know that Virgil spoke of how he always grew up, well, he grew up Catholic too, and always felt God's presence in his life. And I kind of felt that too. Got involved with that. My mom, I was an altar boy and stuff, and so that's kind of my early church stuff. But the reason I feel God was kind of part of my life in a way was because, you know, that middle school years. I taught middle school for the last 16 years of my 36 years of teaching, and recently retired. Elementary was the rest of it. But you know how you, well, that's just a confusing time anyway, but during summer vacation in Cheney back in the day, you could ride your bike anywhere, like all the time. Didn't wear bike helmets, didn't have to worry about anybody, chasing you down or kidnapping you. And I would oftentimes on the evenings when I was on my own, I would find myself up at St. Rose of Lima Church in Cheney, the Catholic church there, and the door was always open. And I mean, what kind of 12, 13, 14-year-old boy pulls into the church and goes in and prays? And that was me, and I kind of remember that was it felt cool, but it also felt weird. And then, you care so much about what people think about you. I remember coming out sometimes thinking, I hope none of my friends see me. But it all worked out good, and I really do feel God had his hand upon me forever. And probably if we all look deep, we can kind of find that too, or will, I hope, at some point. The part I loved about the Catholic Church, of course I don't go there anymore, I don't attend there, but I loved that what I gleaned from that was the holy reverence of God, the awe, the reverential awe, the heaviness. And sometimes if you've not experienced that, we kind of, I think sometimes maybe get our faith out of balance, because God is everything and all things, and he is also our best friend and our companion and our buddy and all those things too. But he is God that who knows what when we get before him, if we'll even be able to stand in his presence. And sometimes I need to remember that I gleaned from my upbringing in the Catholic Church, more of a traditional piece. How I really made that commitment to Christ was in high school. I think it was my sophomore year, I discovered I was brave enough to ask a girl out, the only other girlfriend I've ever had other than my wife Rhonda. And so we started dating, but the problem was she was Assembly of God, okay, extreme Pentecostal. And her dad would not let her date me unless I'd go to church with him every once in a while. And well, at least in that day, AG, Assembly of God, they did Sunday morning, Sunday nights, and Wednesday nights. So I figured, that's easy. I believe in God, you believe in God. I could, I'll go to Mass on Sunday morning, I'll go to church Sunday night and or Wednesday evening with her, and it'll all be cool. And that's where I heard about kind of the personal commitment and a surrender to Christ that is needed for salvation. And so that led me into that. And after the first year of dating, it was Joan decided that maybe this isn't going to work because I'm really not a Christian and stuff. And I remember I'd heard enough, been to enough altar calls or heard it at the church, that it was March of, now this is going to date me, but that's okay. I think it was March of 77. And I was up by the ROTC building at Easter, and it was a nice March wasn't too cold then. It was an evening. It was dark. And I remember sitting up there on a spot, kind of looking up at the sky, and feeling kind of broken. You remember that, right? Your young romances, and you think everything's going to be perfect and it's all going to be great, and then you break up, kind of, and the devastation that is, and the blow to your heart. And I remember looking up to the sky, and music's always been a big part. Not that I play or even sing, but that listening to lyrics has always been important. And I remember, I think it's actually a song by Bad Company, I think, so it's not even a Christian band, but the chorus said, "Love me somebody, somebody love me, take me for what I'm worth, but only love me, but only love me." And I remember that was kind of my heart's cry, because, we'd just kind of broken up, and it hurt like crazy, and I didn't feel loved, and I kind of felt God say, "I love you." And when you feel God say that to you, there's only one response if it's real, and that is to fall at his feet and surrender. And I think that was kind of my conversion moment, was that night on that hill, feeling like God wrapped his arms around me, or I let him for the first time in a real way. And that kind of changed everything. Well, in high school, I got involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was a runner. Got involved with St. Rose of Lima. I didn't leave the church yet, at the Catholic church at that time, so I was involved with a youth group there, and kind of did some stuff like that. Well, then I went to college. And in college, I met my wife, Rhonda. Let's see, what did we do there? A lot of different things. God just kind of always called me to get involved and step out and do things, and I did that in my early walk. We did a thing, Rob's mentioned it, Praise God Fellowship. It was just a bunch of us knuckleheaded college students. God really had moved to me in the late 70s, early 80s. There's some people here I know from high school that's the same thing. They came to salvation during that time. And so Praise God Fellowship was just a bunch of us college kids who got together. One of the guys, his dad pastored a little church, and so we could use that one night. And Rob and I kind of did some leadership stuff there, if you could even call it that. And Rhonda was involved. Rhonda and I ended up, I think it was through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. We led the off-campus Bible study because we didn't live on campus. So we did that for a couple of years. And that was huge growth for me, and meeting some great people and some great leaders. And so those were a few of the things that we did there. So I actually kind of teamed up with Rob way back in college. And actually, if you want any dirt on him, I think we met in kindergarten. Okay? So we go way, way back. Well, in my adult life, then when Rhonda and I got married, I started teaching and moved away for 4 years and ended up on the north end of town for the longest time. And I got busy. Satan uses sometimes that time. You people who maybe can relate to me if you're older and have raised kids, but a lot of times I think that's Satan doing stuff, because I kind of moved away from leadership thingies in churches, and I was too busy sometimes. While you're raising your kids and your family, the most important thing you could do is make sure they see that's a priority, and I didn't during the adult years. I didn't walk away from Christ. It just, you who have been parents, you know how life's busy, and you're tired, and you always make excuses. We started going back to church after the kids, of course, got a little older. Went to Life Center, big church over here, which is cool and good. And again, God stirred in my soul this whole idea of get involved. And so I started doing men's groups, showing up to men's group, and Rhonda and I did premarital training. We do that, yeah. Sarah was one of ours. What else did we do? Oh, I did, one of the biggest was a 9-month, right towards the end, a 9-month men's mentoring thing. I wasn't the mentor, for goodness sakes. I was the mentoree. Is that the right word? Mentoree. And that was pretty deep. Got really close with about 6 guys, and the gentleman who led the group, it was just wonderful. And so stepping out and doing things was important. Again it was. And so I ended up, right about that time, I'm a farm kid, and if you know anything about ranching, farming, nothing changes fast, right? It's like you think of a combine. They don't turn sharp corners. They take big sweeps. And I remember reading, if you haven't read Rob's book, it's a great book. What was it? Something from Zombieland. And I remember sitting at my desk at school during my prep time, and he would send out, back when we were downtown, send out a kind of bi-monthly, or not bi-monthly, monthly, like, newsletter, so to speak. And I think it was called Toilet Paper and Faith. And he was talking to Tonia, his wife, about how we don't have enough money to put toilet paper in the bathrooms this week, and what are we going to do? And I remember God kind of speaking to me. I'm not big on, God told me, but man, it just, that got me fired up. No church should have to worry about toilet paper. There's other, more important things. And so I thought, I can go to Costco, I can buy toilet paper and just take it down there. And I ended up, I don't know if I ever bought toilet paper directly through my tithe maybe, but I ended up going there, not just dropping off toilet paper. And it was kind of like the light switch flipped. And so I started going to the Gathering House about 2 years before we moved up here. And I think that's kind of why Rob asked me maybe to speak this morning. And so I got on the board. They asked me to be on the leadership team, and I was on the leadership team as we sold the building and as we moved up here. And I don't know, Bill Davis probably left for work, but I don't trust a word he said, because he told me you only meet once a month. Well, during that season, we met almost every week, and in my living room, because we didn't have a building to meet in. And so those were crazy and good times, and I was up to my eyeballs in the build out here. We had my table saw over there, which we'd run so much to trim the trim boards out of the pews that we went over to Bellevue to get. And it was a fun but crazy time. I'm glad it's over, and I'm glad we're here. So I was part of that, and that was great too. In the early days, we wanted to try to get more involved, so Bill Davis and I did a kind of co-led men's group. We called it A Few Good Men and Bill and Jim. And so so we just wanted to be real clear on that. Rhonda led a women's group. There were other groups going. I don't know if it was Rhonda or me, but before the group started, we met the same night in different rooms back here, but one of us would always go and look in the other room and count to see who had more people that night. The women always had more people. Yeah. Not that Rhonda and I are competitive, though. Okay. Well, not a fan. I'm going to kind of shift gears now. Not a fan. Where does that come in? Well, that comes into, it's a book I read quite a long time ago by Kyle Idleman, I believe his name is, and the whole premise is that American church, we show up on Sunday mornings, but it's a spectator sport. And so his idea is we need to get out of the stands and into the game. The cool thing about Christianity and God's game is it's not like you have, a roster where there's like you can only have 11 people, like on basketball or whatever it is, or football, you've got your 11 on the offense, 11 on defense, and some special teams. God has room for everybody. And so that's kind of my heartbeat right now. That's kind of what I want to talk about, what I want to think about, what I want you to think about, is getting in the game and how we can do that. Well, as I became kind of on the leadership team, I started noticing things, because you view things through a different lens, and my lens was, why do so many people come to church? Oftentimes they get very involved for a year or two, and then they disappear. And it's usually not a slow thing. It's usually they're here Sunday, they're all in. I mean, guys would come to the men's group and for 1 or 2 weeks, and they'd say, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And it was like, don't ever say that, because those guys never show up again. And they never tell you why. And sometimes there really isn't a reason. It's not like anything we did or said. I just didn't understand. And so I started I did some researchy stuff. That's kind of too heavy, but I just Googled, why do people leave church? And Lifeway Research did one study, and basically it came down to one of the top reasons is always I didn't feel connected. I didn't have relationship. I didn't feel like this was home. And so I want to make sure I don't miss a kind of quote they said here. Let's make sure. Where is that guy there? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so anyway, what used to be, you can't develop relationship unless you spend time together, and that can't be done. This is huge. Sunday mornings are huge, but you can't develop a relationship unless you spend closer time with smaller groups where you actually get to speak and listen to other people, and that just really can't happen here. And so before COVID hit, we had quite a few groups going on here. Opportunities for people to step out and, to me, get in the game. Not just Sunday mornings, not just sit in the stands, but actually get in the game and share their life story and do life together. Right now I think Jen Guglielmo has a couple women's groups going that survived. I'm part of a group that there's 9 of us. We just spent last weekend on the Oregon coast together, 9 of us in one house, and none of this caca stuff that, yeah, drive me crazy. And I did 7th grade too long, so it brings back those days. But we sat on the beach together. That was really, really cool. That wouldn't happen. You know, you just wouldn't come up to 8 other people in this room and say, let's go to the Oregon coast, stay in one house together, okay? There is what I call the old Duffers group or old men's group on Wednesday still. Is that still Wednesday, Ken? Yeah, I've been crazy busy this summer, but I try to make that when I can. And what's the coolest part, I think, one of the cool part about that group is there is no topic. We just get together. Pete Casimir usually leads that, and it's just kind of whatever God put on his heart or wherever direction the conversation goes for that hour and a half. And I love that it's free-floating. And half the guys there or more don't attend this church. And I think that is special. That's really cool. And so I maybe, one more thing that happens to build community here is in the Gathering House, Jerry Wright has kind of spearheaded this, the potlucks, the cruise next week. We've had a movie night here. So she's working hard to provide that for us. Opportunity for you to step out and get in the game. And get out of the stands and meet people and grow together in Christ and grow together as family and friends. So that's that part. Let's see. Yeah, Lifeway's thing, though, back to that for a minute now. There are 2 reasons where people felt that they weren't being growing spiritually enough, and they didn't feel engaged or involved in a meaningful way. In another way, they didn't feel connected. And I taught middle school, and I coached a ton. And I always told my kids, in my math class, to get involved, try something. And because, like, I would say pretty much every high school dropout, one of their main reasons, probably their number one, would be, I don't feel like I fit here. I don't feel like I connect here. And what I tell my kids is, my question to those people would be, did you join a sport? Did you try a sport? No. Did you try band? No. Did you try choir? No. Did you try German or chess or Spanish club? No. Did you try drama? No. Tennis? No. And you get the theme, right? Then they'll say school is boring. And it's like, is school the problem? Who's boring? And so we can do that, though. We can do that here as church too, and that's why I think a lot of people leave, is they say, I just don't feel connected, but they never step out. And so that's my challenge to all of us today, is to give something a try. My default answer always used to be, no, God, I don't have time. My default was, when things would come up, it's like, no. That was my default answer to God, no. And I always had an excuse, don't you? No, I'm too busy. We're all too busy. No. Big one I liked was, it's not convenient right now. Has God ever asked you to do things at a convenient time? No. He doesn't ask us to be convenient. He asks us to be, to just be ready. He asks us to just be there for him, and he'll take care of that. So that's the big change in that I hope we can shift to. We do have some examples. I just want to give you a couple little things here, some that came to my mind right away on biblical references to friendships. One of the first ones to me comes with David and Jonathan. If you know the story real quick, Jonathan was King Saul's son. David became pretty important in Saul's place, but then Saul decided he needed to kill David because God was blessing David too much. Well, Jonathan and David became super close friends. And that can be, you can read about that in 1 Samuel. It's chapters 18 through 20. And I think the coolest part is that in chapter 20, they're having this big meal, and David is supposed to always be sitting at the table with the king and the king's court, so to speak, but Saul's been trying to kill him a number of times. And so Jonathan says, hey, I tell you what, I'll make an excuse with my dad, and you go out in the field and hide behind this rock place where he used to shoot arrows and do archery, and I'll have the boy that goes and gets my arrows for me. I'll shoot the arrow, and I'll talk to my dad, and if everything's cool, I'll shoot the arrows and say, yeah, here they are, they're close, it's right there, and then, David, you will know that it's cool and everything's good, come on out, come back home. But if I say, no, it's further out, if I tell the kid that the arrow's further out, that means run. That means run. My dad's going to kill you. And of course, that's what happened. I mean, that's true friendship. When Jonathan, who probably was in line to be the next king, so to speak, has a friendship that's so deep, he values that more than the kingdom. And that's pretty cool. You can read about that. That's a cool story if you didn't know it or want another one. Another one that came to mind right away was Naomi and Ruth in the book of Ruth. Read that. Short book, great book. Real quick on that, if you're not familiar, is Naomi, her husband died. They had 2 sons. They lived in Moab, not in Judah, not in Israel, where they were from. And she had 2 sons. They married 2 Moab women. What's her name? One was Ruth. The other was, let's see if I can get it, Oprah, O-P-R-A-H. Yes, Oprah. That one. Okay. And so anyway, about 10 years later, the 2 sons both die. So here is Naomi with her daughter-in-laws. And she decides that she wants to go back to Judah, her home, Naomi does. And so Ruth and that other daughter-in-law, they start out with her, but it doesn't say how far they got, but Naomi at one point tells them, you go back home. Your home is there. There's no reason for you to come with me. Your husbands are dead. I can't have more children that you could wait for them to grow up and marry those. So both the women, which is really cool, both women start crying. They all cry together, and both don't want to leave, but after a little more argument, discussion, persuasion, the other one goes back home. But Ruth has some really cool stuff about deep friendship that I love here. And so after Oprah, whatever, leaves, Ruth says in Ruth 1, 16, 17, she says, wherever you go, she's saying this to Naomi, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. That's pretty tight. That's pretty cool. Wouldn't you like to have a bunch of friends like that are that committed? Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. Paul always, his missionary journeys, he always went with somebody else or more than one people. The book of Timothy, Paul refers to Timothy, a younger gentleman, as basically like his son. That was tight friendship. And then, of course, Jesus and the 12 disciples. We aren't supposed to do this thing alone. And so we need to develop those deeper friendships. If you've been coming to the Gathering House for, I'm guessing, let's just say a year. Let's say 2 years. Do you have any close friends here? I mean, really close friends? And if you do, wonderful. And my guess is if you do, I noticed a couple women over here hugging this morning. That didn't happen. That hug didn't develop on Sunday mornings, I don't believe. I believe that's through a women's group, because that's the only place you can develop those type of relationships. Before COVID, there was a group of men and women. That group isn't meeting anymore, but I remember they were usually sat over here, and it was so cool to see the tightness of them. And it didn't develop on a Sunday morning when you were sitting and listening to somebody teach or talk. It developed through communication, through a cup of coffee, through dinner at somebody's house. And so that's what I'd like us to move to. Because we all have that desire to be loved, to be valued, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And We just can't do that there. Church on Sunday, hey, this is important. And it gives us a little opportunity, but not one to develop a deep relationship. And so smaller settings do that. So as summer ends, I've taught 36 years, retired a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. So my world always, and church sometimes revolves around a summer school type schedule, right? Because summer vacation and stuff. So as we kind of get back into the groove of, I'll just call it the end of the school year thing, and the summer vacation ends, I would just encourage you to think about becoming, well, I was going to say becoming part of a group, but we don't have many. So really what it becomes is, and don't say no. I used to do that immediately. Right now he's going to ask me to be part of, nope, I'm too busy, I can't do it, it's not convenient. I'd like us to think about that. We were going to have a questionnaire and stuff, but that didn't pan out. I want you to think about it this week, pray about it, and don't just do that knee-jerk reaction of, no, I'm too busy, I don't have time. Okay? I did that for way too long. So, some ideas for groups. I don't see many of our younger folks here, but maybe an under 30s group. There used to be one off and on. And these groups, by the way, don't have to be every week. They could be just a short time. One group could be, hey, I just got done reading a book, or this book, Not a Fan. I want to read that, but I want to read it with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other people and talk about it. And when you're done with the book, you're done with that season, and maybe you do something else, or maybe that was the group for them. It could be an age thing kind of group. It could just be, let's get together once a month and do a potluck. Just anything to get together where you can actually sit down and get into each other's life a little bit. So you know more than just a name and that deep. What I'm offering is whatever I can do to help, because we need people to kind of lead this. My idea of leadership isn't that I get up and teach or do anything like that. The group that I'm part of that we went to Oregon, I kind of run point on it, I call it, but it's kind of like maybe teaching primary grades at school. To me, it's just you kick the ball out, and everybody will chase it around for a little bit. We'll talk about it, and then when the ball slows down, my job is to kick it again, and you get everybody chased. But I think that's the best way to do a group, and that's what I'm comfortable with. So they aren't just reliant, and I hope none of them even view me as the leader. I'm just part of the group that kicks the ball. So it's not a big deal. And don't use the excuse that I don't know the Bible good enough. Because the whole purpose of the group, isn't it, to get to know God better, which means get to know the Bible better, just like everybody else, and get to know each other better. So those would be the 2 reasons. So that's kind of my thing today. Is if I can help you in any way. Now I don't know. Maybe nobody out there is interested. Maybe nobody's going to get in the game. Nobody's going to step out. And my thing would be right now, because I internalized a lot of this, I used to kind of be offended when I heard one of these talks, because it's like, I'm busy, I don't, and now you're kind of laying a guilt trip on me a little bit. What I kind of learned about that is it's not a guilt trip, it's God working on me maybe. Maybe that's why I'm feeling that little bit of uncomfort and that little bit of resistance. So think about it for a week, okay? My hope, I've not talked to Rob since he left. Texted him a couple times about just getting together, but it never worked out, which is probably the best, because I told him, don't think about church, don't think about this. But I think that he would agree that we will probably have some sort of little questionnaire thing in the next week or 2, just to see if you're interested in anything and what it might be, and if you might be willing to host it at your house, or an idea of where we could host it, or, the church is open, or can be most nights. So anyway, and then if you don't want to wait for that questionnaire, talk to me after service. I'll be hanging out just somewhere, probably right over there where my wife's sitting. Or you can get a hold of the office at gatheringhouse.org. Okay? The 2 things I want to leave you with is, just in summary, is that you talk to God about getting in the game, that you're not content to just be a fan and sit in the stands and cheer God's team on. Good job. Somebody should do that. Oh, you scored a touchdown for God. Good. You know, that's not what this is meant to be. You're supposed to be a player. And then the second one is that you would learn, like, I'm still working on it, of course. I'm still working on everything. But your default answer would change from no and then your excuse to yes, Lord. Okay? So, officeagatheringhouse.org, you can just let them know, hey, I've got an idea about a group, or I'd like to be part of a group, and then tell us kind of what kind of group that might be, you know, whether it's an age thing or a book study or whatever. And then, or just let's get together and hang out and do a barbecue every once in a while, or when it's cold, do dinner. Love to do that. And then they'll probably bounce it to me, because I told Rob and the leadership team that I would run point on that. I'll come help get a group going if that's what you need. A great place to start would be to just get a group, open your house, make a pot of coffee, and tell your stories. You know, that could be a great first place to start, is so you don't even have to put a lesson together. You just make a pot of coffee, and hopefully people can show, because they live in that part of town. You know, of course, we'll do the communicating of here's the address, and all you do is say, hey, welcome, and this is me. I'm glad you're here. And let me tell you a little bit about myself, because that's where family and friendships begin. Okay? Thank you for putting up with me. Rob's back next week, and it's great. I'm going to close this in prayer now, and thank you for being here. Lord, you know, I don't know if anything I said made any sense, and I do hope that if anybody out there, if their knee-jerk reactions like mine still is too many times when you ask me to do things, is no. And, you know, this isn't a good time, this isn't convenient. Yeah, we're always busy. But I pray maybe you'd move some hearts to the idea of yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And then if there is a need, I hope it's met here, that we can provide groups, we could provide family feel, that we could provide more of, like I saw this morning with the two women on the side here, that when they see each other, they can't help but hug, because they've developed that. And it doesn't develop in the larger group where we're taught about your word, but it's doing life together. So I just pray that you'd put that in people's hearts, that you would give them the time to be able to be part of something smaller than Sundays, but bigger in the kingdom, and that's each other's lives. In your name, amen. Thank you.